I'm Jordan Belfort, and this is Sales School. A loop is a response to someone saying, let me think about it, let me call you back, it's a bad time of year, right? It's Santa Claus, the tooth fairy, the whole thing, right? So remember, the idea is this phenomenon called objection hopping. So what happens is when you answer an objection, right, in the looping process, what typically happens is they'll start off saying, yeah, it sounds good, Jordan, let me think about it. And then you run a loop, and then all of a sudden, rather than having to think about it, say, oh yeah, well, it really sounds great. I just got to talk to my wife, right? And then you overcome that with the loop. And say, oh yeah, oh perfect, just, can I call you back in 15 minutes? And then that's the next one. And then you go on they hop objections, right? And the reason people do that, the reason people hop from one to the next is because in truth, all of these objections were merely smoke screens for what? A lack of certainty, the big C. You hadn't had a high enough level of certainty for either 1, 2, 3, or all three of the 3/10, right? Or perhaps you live with someone with an incredibly high action threshold. So in other words, remember, so action threshold represents, right, the sum of someone's buying beliefs about, taking action, trusting people. My best decision is a quick decision. Overall, I think that I can trust most people, that salespeople aren't out to rip me off. That's a low action threshold person. A high action threshold person is, I don't trust salespeople one bit. I need to think things through. I got to do my research, right? People with those types of beliefs will have a high action threshold, meaning that their collective level of certainty for the 3/10s must be really, really high. In other words, for someone to buy, imagine, let me draw this out for you in a graph. So in other words, imagine this is certainty, right? There's a 1 and a 10, right? And as you go down the scale, there's certainty, you go down the straight line, the certainty rises, right? So imagine that someone has an action threshold, right? That is 10, they're very high. That means until you get their collective level of certainty above this, till they're that certain. So if they have, let's say, a 9 action threshold, the sum's got to be essentially like a 9.1 or higher on the collective certainty scale. 3/10s, logic and emotion. If it's below that, they say, I'm not certain enough to act in spite of my beliefs. So my beliefs about not taking action are stronger than my certainty that I'm so sure that this time I'm right, that yes, even though I don't trust most salespeople, I'm sure of this one. So they're that sure that their action, that their essentially their level of certainty exceeds this predisposition not to be certain, not to buy, right? Versus someone with a low action threshold like me, where you get me to like a 7, 8, 7, meaning I'm 7 on the product, 8 on the salesperson, a 7 on the company, but I have a 6 action threshold. I'm like, yeah, most of the time I think it's okay, so I'll buy. So people with higher action thresholds need to go further down the straight line. They require more loops because now we're going back. Watch. So if you go back now to what I first said, I said, watch. A loop happens in response to an objection. So notice someone answers an objection, right? So someone gives you an objection, right? What's the first thing you do? I'll show you. With your initial loop, I skipped the page. I'm not going to waste paper now, right? So with your first loop, loop number 1, right? It starts with the process of deflection. Meaning we don't even answer the objection head on. So if someone says, oh, it sounds good, Jordan, but let me think about it. So now the reason I use that compound answer, it sounds good, but let me think about it, is because most of the time that's what you get. When you ask for the order, so they'll just say, let me think about it. They say, oh, it sounds okay. So they'll give you some indication of where they stand, but they'll qualify, oh yeah, it sounds pretty good. Let me call you back. So typically your initial objection will be a compound answer, right? So when we deflect, all it means is that we essentially don't address the second part of the compound answer. Head on. It sounds good, right? So watch. It sounds good, but let me think about it. I need to think about it, right? So compound answer, right? So what we do with deflection is I focus on this, okay, and I sort of deflect. I said, I hear what you're saying. I said, but let me ask you a question. Though, does the idea really make sense to you? Do you like the idea? I address this aspect, right? Because remember, it's at this point, it's all about the fact that they're not at a high enough level of certainty about your product first. Because remember, people, unless they love your product, they're not going to buy from you. So it doesn't matter yet about you or the product. They can trust you. They say, listen, Jordan, I really trust you, but I think your product sucks. They're not going to buy anyway. So what's the point of addressing the trust factor when you haven't established first that they love your product? That's why that's the first thing we always do, right? So our initial loop starts with deflection. We deflect the objection. And I just say, does the idea make sense? Do you like the idea, right? And then I run this pattern, right? Starting with my first, so watch, it starts with deflection. I then have my first pattern where I essentially build on the airtight logical case that I framed in my initial presentation. I then go to my Forrest Gump pattern, right? That's second where I sell myself, and then I resell the company. So that's all in this middle part of the loop. And then I transition into a close and I ask for the order. So in other words, a loop always begins with either deflecting the objection in the first one, or then in the second one, you're actually going to answer the objection, but I never will just say, I hear what you're saying, about your wife, but just give me one shot and buy from you. There's always something in between, and what's in between is where the magic happens. This is the magic. It's what you say after you say, I hear what you're saying, but let me say this. And when you say, let me say this, what you're doing is you're filling in the blanks of your airtight logical case and making it that much stronger. So for those people, watch. So let's say that your initial presentation got someone to like a 6 or a 7 on the certainty scale, but they have a 9 action threshold. You have to raise their level of certainty. You have to. There's no way they're going to buy unless they're more certain about all 3 10s. So what we do is we run the loop to move them down the line to a higher level of certainty. And then we ask for the order again. So we raise that. So we use the objection as an opportunity to loop back into presentation mode, rebuild more certainty, and ask for the order again. So the patterns you run, the things that you say, are designed to make your product so they understand it's that much more awesome than you already thought. You're making it that much more awesome in the prospect's mind. And also when it comes to emotional certainty, you're starting to future pace them on how it will make them feel in the future when they are going to the vacation rental, driving the car down the road with the wind blowing in their hair, or have the insurance policy and no longer worried about getting sick because their kids will be taken care of no matter what. You get it? So you're always future pacing to create emotional certainty about all 3 10s. So when you run your first loop and ask for the order again, they might now, because you've raised their level of certainty, but it's not high enough, they'll hop to a new objection. Now, on the second objection, when you loop, you're always, again, you're going to answer the objection head on. So they hit you with, now let me talk to my wife, right? So you're going to say, I understand you want to talk to it, but let me say this. And then you can go to some of the rebuttals I've given you and pick out that rebuttal about why they don't really need to talk to their wife. But then you would never, ever go from answering the objection to the close. Something has to be in between. Because remember, the objection was a smokescreen for a lack of certainty. That's what it was. So there has to be something in between that does what? That raises their level of certainty. So you answer the objection, then you go loop back again, and you resell the product again, you resell yourself again, more emotion this time, future pacing, resell the company, and now you can lower the action threshold using that pattern. So now what you're doing is you're attacking it from 2 levels now. You're raising up their level of certainty and you're lowering their action threshold. And if it happens to cross over where you've lowered their action threshold enough so that their level of certainty is higher, that's when they buy.